Welcome back to Between Pages and Friends, a book club podcast hosted by Con and Lauren, two besties who read a lot of books, and John and Kyle, the supportive gamer husbands who've agreed to read with them. I'm Kyle.
I'm Con.
I'm John.
And I'm Lauren. Welcome to episode 8 of our Throne of Glass book club. In this episode, we're discussing the last two sections of the book, The Assassin's Blade, The Assassin in the Underworld and The Assassin in the Empire. This is a book club style podcast, meaning there is no spoilers for future chapters or books. However, we did read Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight before The Assassin's Blade. So for these episodes covering The Assassin's Blade, we will be discussing books 1 and 2 as well.
Yes, so if you have not read Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight yet, please read those two books before coming back to listen to these episodes 7 and 8 of our podcast. Additionally, this is your mild content warning as we will be discussing themes from these stories that include, well, assassins and blades. This episode will include 2 brief name pronunciation guides with me, 2 story recaps from John, initial reactions and favorite moments, followed by overall thoughts and theories as we wrap up this book.
And if you're looking for bonus content, early access to episodes, an incredible community of other book lovers, live events, merch discounts, there's just so much more we could list, you should check out our Patreon.
One of the best ways to support this podcast is by rating and reviewing. Courtney on Spotify says, huge fan of the podcast. I've already read the series, but you've pointed a couple things out that I missed the first time around, so it forces me to look at it from a different perspective. I love it. Courtney, thank you so much. Reviews like this mean the world to us. And thank you all for being here and for reading with us. So without further ado, let's jump into the pronunciation guide.
Yes, we are kicking it off with The Assassin in the Underworld. I only have a few name pronunciations for these last 2 stories of the book, but the first one that I have is Benzo Donoval. He's the immensely powerful businessman from Melisande. And then Leifer Bardendale was described as being like good friends with the Queen of Melisande, and he's the one that's like leading the people into Rifthold. And then the last one I have for this story is Diana Bracken, which is another one of Celaena's fake names.
Add one in there.
Yeah.
Couldn't leave without one.
Yes, I do actually have a quick note on her name. I did think it was interesting that we just talked about in episode 7 that Celaena was like a descendant of a goddess, and the goddess that she's a descendant of is named Deanna, but her like fake name that Arabin gives her is Diana, which I thought was kind of interesting. All right, John, over to you.
Story 4. Here we go. Celaena returns from the Red Desert, ready to pay off her debt and be free of Arabin, but he apologizes. So heartfelt, kind of. He buys her a bunch of fancy jewelry, buys her a dope new assassin suit, and we officially meet Lysandra. We've heard of her, but we officially meet her in person. And Arabin has a new job for Celaena. There's some nobility coming from Melisande with some important figures as, yes?
Melisande.
Melisande. I don't care.
Okay.
Also, I feel like people are going to come at this in general because, like, you had said Lauren also mentioned to you about when he was going through all of the like details of like who was coming from Melisande, and he was like talking through that. I just thought it was so confusing, like trying to track what was going on. You know what I mean? Because they were like
the road and the map. And stuff.
The road and who Donoval was and Leifer, and it's just like what? Anyway,
sorry.
Okay, Melisande.
Melisande.
I don't like it.
Melisande.
And here we go. Okay. There's some nobility coming from Melisande with some important figures. There's some like slave trade talk going on. Basically, Arabin tells her that one of the guys who is coming in, Donoval, is in talks with someone and has some kind of co-conspirator in Rifthold. He has a list of names who are in favor of the slave trade. She is to basically steal those documents, kill Donoval and his co-conspirator who is in Rifthold. They go to a big fancy party where she gets some more info on Donoval. Dorian and Kale show up. Oh my God. It doesn't outrightly say that, but we know it's them. She ends up sneaking into Donoval's study a few days later to steal the documents, but it's a trap. Donoval's bodyguard gets her, and they lock her under the house in some kind of cellar where the sewers are to be like flooded and cleared. It's like an annual thing that Rifthold does. So they lock her down there. assuming that she's going to drown. She finds her way to a sewer grate and is like screaming for help. Sam was coming to help her and actually hears her. They're trying to get the manhole cover off. The water's coming up. She ends up getting submerged. She just comes to basically being resuscitated. Sam tells Selena that he loves her, and they kiss, young love. They make a plan to go back to the house and break in during the meeting with Donoval's co-conspirators. So Selena gets in there. They come into the room. She ends up killing Donoval and the bodyguard, not before the bodyguard curses Selena and says that she has no idea what she's just done. She chases the other guy down to an alley. He burns some documents that he was carrying and then poisons himself. Sam discovers the spider silk swatch in his new suit. So that's the spider silk swatch that Selena got from the merchant. She had it sewed in. Selena also pays Sam's debt to Arabin by selling the Asterian horse. Then we come to find out that Donoval was actually the good guy who was trying to stop the slave trade in Rifthold, and the documents she stole were used to persuade the king of Otterlin to help build a road to Melisande, bring slaves to wherever, transport. Arabin massively played Selena in the story, and at the end, she ends up moving out of the Assassin's Keep with Sam.
Oof. Yeah, that was a lot. Let's go into our favorite moments. I don't know if I would call this a favorite moment after I just said that, but in chapter 1, this is the first time you really see Arabin and Selena talk to each other. They have the big meeting at the very first one where he tells her that Ben died and she's all upset. And then he punches the lights out of her, literally. And so now we're here and we're seeing their actual relationship. And he is really touchy-feely with her in the most creepy way, but he's just he brushed her hair back from her face. He says he misses her. Later in the chapters, he's kisses the top of her head and he's caresses her cheek, and it just the most creepy stuff. And in the very first chapter I wrote, Arabin is the biggest, most manipulative jerk I have ever read. And I had no idea what was to come in the rest of these chapters. And I was so on from that very beginning, but just giving her gifts and trying to convince her that everything's fine. And a big part of me, I think just as a 30-year-old woman, is being don't fall for that, whatever. But I have to remember, she's 16. And, at 16, if some person that you looked up to and was giving you gifts and was saying, you're this great assassin, you're all the things that she wants to hear, I'm not, surprised, I guess, to know that she had such a hard time letting go of that relationship. I feel it's probably easy to look at it and be you're being dumb, whatever, But yeah, he definitely is manipulating her so much. Much.
And she literally has grown up with him since she was 8. I mean, she's always looked up to him and learned from him literally everything, even just down to the way that she thinks. And so it's even seeing the way that she responds to his manipulation and him being a creep or whatever, and it's just no, Selena.
Yeah, he knows exactly what she likes with all the gifts that he was giving her. I think at some point she was she didn't want to open them, but she really wanted what it was. So that was what led to her opening all these gifts and accepting them. And after she accepted them, she was well, I can't stay mad at him now because I've accepted all of his gifts.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking more about that later.
Unfortunately.
Yes. Also, in chapter 1, this just made me laugh. We see Lysandra on the page after hearing about her a little bit in Crown of Midnight, but it says she'd met Lysandra when they were both 10, and in the 7 years that they'd known each other, Selena couldn't recall a time when she didn't want to beat in the girl's face with a brick or throw her out a window. I was just cracking up at this, especially because this is coming right after the story of the Red Desert, where she literally punches Ansel in the face. It sounds so dramatic, but also she probably would have done it if given the opportunity.
Or wouldn't get punished by Arabin or somebody.
Yeah,
that's absolutely true. Yeah. In chapter 2, I think last episode, Con, you were talking about your theory of who Sam's parents are. And so this is where I had left my note. This is them recapping and kind of reintroducing who Sam is, as far as this is a new mini book inside this large book. And it said his, being Sam's, his mother had been one of them, being a courtesan, and had asked Arabin, a patron of hers, to look after her son, after she had died. And so it was, you get little bits of that throughout all of it. And it wasn't until this one and the fourth one that I was maybe Arabin is Sam's dad, being that he was a patron of Sam's mom, and instead of leaving him with the rest of them, she sent him over to the assassins to be with Arabin. Was he there when he was also 8, 6?
He was 6 when his mom died.
Yeah. So I don't have any idea if we'll ever learn the answer to that. Sam sadly dies in these chapters or in this chunk of the book. So I don't know that he ever gets brought up again for that reason, but interesting theory. So
yeah, I had to Google it because it's not something we ever like get confirmation on one way or another. But that's why I was so shocked like reading this again. And I was like, wait a minute.
Are we the only people that think this theory?
No, there are other people on the internet that are wondering about it, but there's no like confirmation anywhere. It's just like something interesting. I do still have another piece of that I will bring up again later, but I feel like it makes more sense to talk about it after like the end of the book. We can keep going.
Yeah, I was going to just say that with Sam and Selena and even Arabin and Ben themselves, they said they started when they were pretty young. And in terms of his manipulation of who he works with, I wonder how young he got the other assassins, knowing that younger folks would be much more formable like that. Like he probably couldn't hire an adult and have all of this pull in their lives and say like, well, I raised you and like, I know you. So I wonder if this is a common thing. I mean, obviously it's common enough to happen twice with him, even though one of them, supposedly the mom, was like, please raise my son, but still to take people in at a young age and learn how to manipulate them specifically.
Do they ever mention if there's other younger assassins at the keep? Like, is he raising the next generation after Selena and Sam kind of a thing? Or are they the youngest?
I don't think so.
Because they always mention older ones.
That is interesting, though.
They did say in the Red Desert there were like acolytes that were younger that hadn't officially started their like assassin training yet, but they like helped out around
But that was in the desert.
The place. But that was in the Red Desert with the silent assassin. So I don't know.
And I don't know if it says how he got the older assassins on his side, does it?
Right.
No, I don't
They
think
just
so.
joined the guild or whatever.
Yeah, they just saw whatever power he had and joined under him for the sake of having it being part of the guild.
The guild.
The guild. Sorry, guys, I was born in Texas, so it kind of slipped out sometimes.
No, you weren't. You were born in Florida.
That's true, but only for like 2 years. I was born for 2 years in Florida.
His poor mom. Anyway, last episode, John was mentioning this, that Selena is just the most girly girl that there is. And so she comes out of the Red Desert. She stops at an inn to clean her, like take a shower and clean her clothes before she sees anyone in the first place, because standards. And then as the moment she has time to herself, she goes out and she goes to get her nails done and her hair and stuff. It said, for now, not even the rain would keep her from a little pampering. She had to go do her thing. When she got to her salon, the girls were so excited to see her again because they knew who she was. I also just loved that. You gotta have your regular spot, you know?
Yeah.
And then she finally runs into Sam and he says, you know, like, why was he still there? Why didn't he just leave? Arabin was, I guess, kind of the conversation. And he said, my price was his oath that he'd never lay a hand on you again. I told him I'd forgive him in exchange for that. And I just wrote Sam with a bunch of cry emojis. Really sad about it.
I love him.
Yeah, I love that he's just finally like bold about his feelings. I don't know what's kept them from sharing so far up until now. Maybe whatever happened with the Pirate Lord, they kind of just like crossed a line, I guess. Like that started opening that for him. And finally he's just like, whatever, and starts being cute, I guess.
Whatever, guess I'll be cute.
Oh, but I appreciate it. So
they do mention that like Arabin like pits them against each other and stuff. It said something specifically about how he taught her that like everyone except for Arabin and Ben were enemies. And so I feel like it makes sense that, especially with her being the only girl and talking about how she has to like keep these boundaries up and stuff, you know, because she feels vulnerable when she's surrounded by all of these men or whatever. I feel like it makes sense that she would have had those walls up around Sam. But then, I think for Sam, it was seeing her freak out about the possibility of him being dead in Skulls Bay. Like when she's like panicking, like looking for him and he's just like standing there watching her for a minute. Like, because I think that was like probably a turning point for him of like, oh, like she does actually care about me. But it is so cute.
It is extremely cute. I also think Arabin sending her away to the Red Desert, I think was a way for him to try to separate them. Like maybe he saw them potentially crossing a line, especially whenever he did beat up Selena and however Sam reacted. And so he sent her away. But I think if anything, it was one of those like absence makes the heart grow fonder situations for Selena. I'm thinking Selena in the sense that she had time to process her feelings and she had that little moment with Ilias that let her to be like, whoa, you're not Sam. Hold on. Like, wait, hold on. Why does him not being Sam matter?
Right.
You know, and trying to figure that whole thing out. So if anything, I think it like helped progress their relationship, even though they were separated for 3 months.
With Sam being or coming from like the courtesan way of life, being connected to that in so many ways, she may have felt uncomfortable with him and all men living in an area where young girls like her are a commodity to these people. And that is the life that Sam grew up in. And we even see that when she does come back and Lysandra is like around Sam. And the first thing she thinks of is like, oh, of course he spent all this time with all of these girls. Because why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
He's handsome and he lives that life. And it takes her a while to get over that part of their relationship too, until he starts admitting to her like how he feels and stuff like that.
Well, he learned all those things from those pirate ladies.
Right. You got to test those moves out.
It's so funny. With all this, though, they go to the theater in chapter 3, and she's dressed all so pretty. And Sam says, you look beautiful, though I bet you already know that. And then it just said, she most certainly did. I just love her. I love her confidence. I'm a fan.
So good. I just love the way that they describe the music again here. I know we talked about this. I think it was in book 1 with like the pianoforte, but she's like just listening to the music at the theater. And these are direct quotes, but they're kind of pieced together from this whole big long paragraph. So I'm just reading parts of it here, but it says, everything she knew and everything she was faded away into nothing. The music annihilated her. She felt all of it along her skin, along her bones. The music broke her apart and put her back together, only to render her asunder again and again. Then silence. The silence was the worst thing she'd ever heard. The silence brought back everything around her. Applause erupted and she was on her feet, crying still as she clapped until her hands ached. And I just I just loved the way that she described this whole experience of being like swept up in a show in like a live theater setting. And then that like moment of silence before the applause at the end, like bringing reality crashing back down around you. I just loved all of that. It was so good. Such good writing from Sarah.
Well, and as a performer, like that moment you do, like put it out all on the stage and then the audience is just silent. And then they clap is like the best thing as a performer, 100%. I don't know if this is me overthinking things, but like hearing you reread this. And then later at the very end of the book when Sam dies and she references again, the silence. Like that's when it hit, you know? And it's like, are we feeling that same moment? Where it's like all the emotions, all the things, and then all of a sudden it's just over. And it's just the silence. And then, you know, it all comes crashing down on her again with the emotions and the feelings right before she walks into Endovir. And it just, I don't know, maybe that's
some like foreshadowing sort of.
Yeah, kind of a thing. Or like, yeah, some parallels in that. But
yeah.
If you want to foreshadow that even more, you could say her coming home from the concert and trying to play it herself and not quite getting it right could be foreshadowing her future relationships with Dorian and Cale, because they both emulate certain parts of Sam being a very handsome, princely boy and also a fighter. And Dorian and Cale are both sides of that.
Wow, Kyle. Let's get deep.
Wow.
You're not wrong, though. Like
Kyle, I know.
Go deep with Kyle. Wait, I mean...
That's another channel.
That's not what I meant.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so in chapter 4. So, well, hold on. Not in chapter 4. In Throne of Glass, Kyle was really struggling trying to figure out, like, what timeline are we in? And I posted, like, a big video, if you haven't seen it, on our Instagram or TikTok of Kyle just going off about the clock on the table and the meaning behind that and what timeline we would be in, like, era and all the things. And so we keep joking every time we read another thing, like, oh, there's another clock, or there's, you know, whatever, and seeing where Kyle's at. So we're sitting together, we're sitting on the couch. He's on one side, I'm on the other. And I read, she spent an hour soaking in her bathtub, running the hot water until she was fairly certain there wasn't any left for anyone else in the keep. Later, we learned that, yes, they do have running water, and so does her apartment building, and like that's a thing. But at the time, this was the first time it was mentioned, and I was just like, oh, they have running water. So I brought it up to Kyle to see his opinion. And Kyle, at this point, I think was fed up with it. And he said,
I just said to her, you know what? F it. You put whatever you want in your books, Sarah. Running water, hidden mechanisms, and skin tight suits, pocket watches, whatever they need in the moment, throw it in. But I will defend myself a little bit here because, like, all credit where credit is due, she got a bunch of books published, and these exact same like neuroses that I have to notice these things in writing are the exact reason I could never write a book myself. So all props to people who write books and get them published. Good for you. I'm too mentally unstable to do it myself.
Oh my God. Well, they do like talk about, I think it's in maybe chapter 1 where they're talking about the people from Melisande and how they specialize in stuff like that and all their little like trinkets and the, yes, and the clocks, like the clockwork and like all those things. And it kind of alludes to like almost as if magic never disappeared from their territory or something. Like there's some sort of magical element to these objects, or maybe that's how they become so advanced, and maybe that's a cop out. I don't know, but that's sort of how she explains it. I feel like
I'm still here for it. I mean, she's doing the right thing. She's letting you into the world without just giving you a history book about it. So you want to learn more about it. Although back in the day, there were like extra books you could get with series that were like, here's for all the nerds. Like, here's every monster, here's every device, here's how it works, here's where they come from. I loved those books as a kid. So Sarah, if you want to write one of those for me, that would be lovely.
We have recently heard of some new fantasy books where there's a glossary, like in the beginning of the book.
Nice.
That'd be nice.
Love me a glossary.
Maybe we'll cover those on the pod.
Well, and this also goes with for someone like Kyle who does like to have all the info of everything up front. This might be an argument for reading Assassin's Blade first, because I do think there are a lot of things in this book that are more world building. Yeah. We still get it in Throne of Glass. It's just this is a different side of it, I think. And obviously putting it all together, you learn it as you go, whatever. It's like any other book. But this, like something like this with the, this is how the running water works and this is how the sewer system works every year. They, you know,
a diagram of the castle sort of thing.
I think, there's some of that happens in this book that Kyle, I think, would have not had those conversations going in Throne of Glass if he had read this first, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
For me, didn't affect anything at all. This aspect, I'm fine.
All right, continuing on in chapter 4, I just love that Sam tracked down the sheet music for her, especially, and I love that they like pointed out that it would have taken months or years for like, you know, a common person for the sheet music to be available for someone, but he like tracked it down and he leaves the note that says, "Try not to stain them with your tears when you play. It took a lot of bribes to get these." But I'm just like, I just love this so much. Like this almost made me cry. It was just such a sweet moment from Sam and this like big gesture for her that like meant so much to her.
I was waiting for the time where she was playing the music or like that she mastered it or that they would say, but they don't really mention it again other than like when she goes to her dance lesson that she should stay and play piano afterwards or something like that.
Is this what she plays in Throne of Glass?
That's what I was going to ask.
Is it?
When Dorian like
because it would remind her of Sam.
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna search for it.
I was just going to talk about how it's funny that she takes dance lessons, but this is so precious.
I mean, I don't think it describes very specifically what she plays. No. It's more like...
I feel like it kind of does.
But she has it memorized, whatever it is. So she's obviously played it before.
I thought of her, I remember it describing just like what was being played and how she felt it like coming out or something like that.
It described what it did to her, and that description is very similar to how it described her listening to it at the concert, where it's like, it tore me apart and put me back together again and all that. That's pretty much, if I'm remembering right, not word for word, but very similar to her playing in Throne of Glass and how it described her playing the music.
Well, and then it leads into the conversation with Dorian about Sam. Like they go over and sit down and it like brings up those thoughts and those feelings. So
she cries during
I
it,
would
doesn't
never have thought of that. That's really cute.
I found the part, but it's like a couple paragraphs where it describes her playing playing. It says, gingerly with one hand, she tapped out a simple, slow melody on the higher keys. Echoes, shreds of memories arising out of the void of her mind. It was a piece that she used to play again and again until Arabin would yell at her to play something else. So I don't know. I don't know if it was the same thing, but it says it was a mournful piece, but it made her into something clean and new. She was surprised that her hands had not forgotten that somewhere in her mind, after a year of darkness and slavery, music was still alive and breathing. That somewhere between the notes was Sam. When Dorian asks her about it, he says something like, and what was that piece? It was so sad. Were you thinking about a secret lover? And he's like kind of teasing her, but then she's like, yes.
That's really sweet. Even if it's not, I feel like it is in my head, and that's going to stick with me. That's really precious.
She was like thinking about him in that moment.
Yeah, so, she was. So I feel like that makes sense to me.
But. Well, honestly, like with how quickly she got this sheet music and was sent to Endovier, she probably never had time to memorize it before she got taken to the Throne of Glass.
Well, but it did say she was doing the dance lessons after that, right? Or no?
No, that was a past. It was like a memory of her.
Thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Because she wasn't with.
She would take dance lessons, and then she spent the last 20 minutes dancing as crazily as she wanted to.
I thought it was because she said even after the lady didn't charge her when she was free of Arabin or something, that she didn't like charge her because she didn't have a piano, that she would stay afterwards and play. That's what I thought it said.
Yeah. That's what I thought too.
Since she didn't have a piano anymore from the keep. I don't know.
Anyway, I do love the idea of her like playing that song over and over again because Sam got her the music, that like Arabin got sick of it and was like yelling at her to stop playing it.
Well, even if she can go to the theater once and hear the song and then get back and play it enough
that's
that
fair.
Sam in the hallway recognized what she was playing. Like, girl's talented enough to, even if it wasn't exactly what was on the page, but play it a year later. I would totally believe that she could do that. I could also see Arabin being upset about it because Sam gave her the music, since he's super selfish about her and Sam's relationship and whatever. So I don't know. Either way, we head into chapter 5 where they're at a big time house party, and a lot of things happen here with the politics and who's talking to who and all the things. And Selena pretends to be, is it Diana, and talks to the guy or whatever. But my only note from here was Dorian and Kale. I was like, it is Dorian and Kale, right? And then John at the beginning was like, it totally is. And I was like, yes.
I like freaked out about that. I totally forgot about that. And on the reread, I have a note in all caps that says, it's effing Dorian and Kale.
It is. So I was freaking out too. Well, and because I mentioned it to Kyle too, and I was like, what do you think about Dorian and Kale being there? And he's like, well, it wasn't them. And I was like, yes, it was, because it was some guy, they're wearing masks, and he was all swagger and sauntered up to her and whatever, and how it described him.
Eyes.
And
yeah.
6'5".
I'm looking for a man in Rifthold, Crown Prince, blue eyes.
That Crown Prince really narrows it down. Like, they know exactly who you're talking about.
It's funny.
Gotta be specific.
Yes. And then the other guy just being so rigid and on guard. And whenever, Dorian comes up to Selena and they're dancing and stuff, and then, Kale's right there to like guard or like whatever. I was like, that has to be them. And yeah, I just thought that was very funny.
That's another point to reading The Assassin's Blade third, because if you read it first, you totally miss that.
Absolutely.
But it's like a fun little cameo. Not that it really changes a lot.
Easter egg
the
kind
story,
of vibes.
Yeah. So cute. Oh, but also from this little party, when Selena's just like having a grand old time, there was this part where it says bottles of sparkling wine passed from hand to hand, mouth to mouth. Selena swigged from all of them. And I just typed in all caps, Selena, you big dummy. Obviously it wasn't poison, but like, have you learned nothing? That's gross.
We all know the easiest way to get to her. A cake or a goblet of wine.
Unmarked.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. If you've already eaten or drinking from said goblet or fork
if you
or whatever.
Leave it bedside for her to wake up and just
on her pillow.
Go to town on.
That's funny. Chapter 6, she's talking to Lysandra, and it says Lysandra's face was flushed, making her green eyes sparkle. And I went, green equals bad guy. I don't know if Lysandra is, but so far this theory has been correct. So we're going to hold on to that information.
May not be evil, but she's a bit of a bad guy.
That's not where I thought you were going with that.
Family friendly. We don't really talk. I don't think anyone really talks about Lysandra's fate, I think, necessarily in this little chunk with her and Arabin or the bidding. I believe that happens in this chapter, which also just shows how creepy AF Arabin is. So part of me feels really bad for Lysandra. Like, I don't really know anything about her. She comes, to Celaena, she's not it, but that doesn't mean she really isn't. But the green eyes is what's kind of confirming to me that maybe she is a baddie, and I just don't know it yet. But maybe she's a baddie, I don't know. We're gonna find out.
Okay, but anyway. Celaena, oh my gosh, this is like line from Celaena. She's not even directly talking to Lysandra, she's talking to Sam, but Lysandra's standing right there. This is when like Lysandra asked Sam to go to lunch or whatever, and Sam asked Celaena, do you want to go to lunch with me? And she's like, no, you should go. I have work to do anyway. I don't get to be the best simply by lying on my back all day. All caps. Mm-hmm. Ooh, sick bird.
That was a good one.
Oh, that got me.
We don't have to talk about it because I don't really know how this conversation would go. But like, for them to say like, she's been trained her whole life to be, what she's going to be, but she's still a virgin.
Right.
But she's being, I don't know like what that all would consist of, but it just feels like a really not it lifestyle. But
yeah. Celaena mentions it whenever she's talking about like how she hates that she's hanging out with Sam, because she says like, I know she's still a virgin because she hasn't done her bidding yet, but there's plenty of other things that they could have done without going that far. So
true. Well, and whatever she could have watched or seen or
yeah,
who knows.
I feel like a lot of it, honestly, it's probably just like behavioral too, because you have to like.
Yeah,
you have
flirting
to act a certain way.
Be escorted. Yeah. Like
when you hold your fan this way. When you hold your fan this way.
Even just like how to treat clients when they like take you out to the theater or whatever, because they do. It seems like that's just like a normal thing for them to be dates to stuff and whatever. So
some of it might also just be like, keep yourself safe. Like, these are the things you have to know in case it gets crazy. Like, self-defense or whatever.
Yeah, and just like the beauty aspect of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So her whole job isn't just laying on her back. What we're learning here. Got her back, Celaena. Ha! Oh, anyway.
Yeah. Well, the next note that I have on a very different note is chapter 9, when Sam finally tells Celaena that he loves her. And I just, I have highlighted it, so I have to just read it. He says, I love you. I have for years, and years was italicized, and that just like, ugh. And he hurt you, and he made me watch because he's always known how I felt too. But if I asked you to pick, you'd choose Arabin, and I can't take it. This almost got me. I almost started crying here. And then I just love like her response. She's like, you're a damned idiot. You're a moron and an ass and a damned idiot because I'd pick you. And then she kissed him, and I put it in all caps. And then I'm like, this part's just so funny to me because I was about to like cry at how sweet this is. And then remembered they're literally in a sewer.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
That did cross my mind after the fact. Like, I read whatever and then went on with my life, like put the book down, and that crossed my mind later. But at the time I was full fangirling.
My only note here, moving along to chapter 10, this was right after the kiss. So they kiss, they're making out in the sewer. And it says she couldn't hold him tight enough, kiss him fast enough. A growl rumbled in the back of his throat, so full of need she felt it in her core. Lower than that, actually. And I was like, hey-oh.
I thought the same thing when I heard that. I was like, oh, okay. Go off, queen.
You go off, queen.
Well, and I also like the fact that she's the one who pushed him up against the wall.
Yeah.
Like, she just like she gave it all she got. Is that what we said? Is that what we said earlier?
Gave it
her all.
Had. Yeah.
I mean, knowing her though, if one of them's going to be against the wall of a sewer, it's not going to be her.
That's very true.
Good point.
True.
Good call, Kyle.
Oh my gosh. Oh, and then chapter 11, I think it's earlier in the book, when she is having the suit tailored, or the guy from Melisande is like showing her how to use it, and she hands him the spider silk. You think that she's having him put it in her suit, and then this whole reveal where it's in his suit and he should have died, but it like saved his life. And it's just, I don't have words for that. It just was all very emotional.
You just wrote 4 crying emojis.
I just put a bunch of crying emojis. That's probably what's in my Kindle app too. I like that. That's where I put my notes while I'm reading, and it's mostly emojis. And then, and then freaking Arabin at the last chapter of this book, where Lysandra, she sees her in the hall. And then it says, it took a moment for the words to sink in. The money that Celaena had sacrificed so much to get ... He'd used it to win Lysandra's bidding. And I just put, I hate him in all caps.
Well, and earlier in the chapter, Celaena said something about her relationship with Arabin, and she was like, father, teacher, lover. And I was like, what? And then it was but we never crossed or never went there. He never took it that direction. And I was just like, what the heck?
Lysandra's the same age as her.
That's what I'm saying. And he's been basically raising her. He's been providing for her. He's paid for her schooling and everything the exact same way. So he could have easily manipulated Celaena into the same situation, I think, as what happened to Lysandra. And so that's what I was saying earlier, I think, and just, where her fate ended in this chunk of chapters, because I think this is the last we hear from her in this book. And it's just really, really sad. I get that she's, to a certain extent, chosen so much of the life, but I wouldn't be surprised if she's also manipulated in a very similar way that Celaena has been on her side. So I hope that Lysandra gets away or has her, maybe.
Did you say kill him?
To kill him.
Lysandra becomes an assassin.
You better get a refund on that bidding.
But yes, has her chance to get away or do, I don't know, live a better life. So, but that is the end of The Assassin and the Underworld.
Yeah, so for the Assassin in the Empire, I only have a couple of pronunciations, but most of the names in this one were either ones we'd heard before or they were pretty straightforward. So I just have the Black Signet Tavern, and then Helmsen, who was the master of ceremonies during the fights in the vaults, and Counselor Rensel, who was the one who read the list of charges against Celaena when the king is talking to her at the end. So here's John with the recap.
All right, quick recap for the Assassin and the Empire. So Sam and Celaena are out of the Assassin's Keep and wanting a change of scenery to get far away from Arabin after everything that's happened, but they need money. Sam finds a big job that would set them up nicely. It is to kill Iwan Jane, Rifthold's crime lord, and his second, Rourke Farron. No easy task. Those are two names that we've heard before. Arabin finds out, of course, and even tells Celaena that this is a bad idea. Sam insists on killing Farron himself and doing it his way first, and then they can follow Celaena once Farron is dead, and they can move on to Iwan Jane and go after him. So the night that Sam goes off to kill Farron, he doesn't return for a while, and Celaena gets a little nervous. She's pacing back and forth a lot in the apartment. She goes out a couple times to look for him. The last time she goes out, comes back. Arabin is waiting in her apartment. The only thing that he can say is, "I'm sorry," and she kind of knows at that point what that means. Celaena's freaking out as they take her back to the Assassin's Keep, where Sam's body is. Farron or his people, they left Sam at the gate of the Assassin's Keep because they assumed that he was kind of, still staying there or whatever. And she goes to see Sam. He's practically unrecognizable after being tortured and killed by Farron. Celaena goes a little dark for a little while. She's staying at her old room at the Assassin's Keep. She overhears Arabin and some of the other assassins outside of her room apparently planning to get back at Farron. She decides that she can't let them be the ones to get revenge. So in a rage, she sneaks out the window to finish it herself. As she's leaving the grounds there at the Assassin's Keep, Wesley catches her, tries to warn her about something, but she knocks him out before he can get it out. She ends up going to the crime lord's house to exact revenge, but it's yet another trap. And while she does kill Iwan Jane kind of in the starting of the madness, Farron was ready for her. They gas her in the room. It's like a gas version of the Gloriella. She's wondering this whole time who it was that betrayed her. As she spent some time in the royal dungeons, she's put on trial, quote unquote, for her crimes, and the king punishes her to the slave mines of Endovier. She's carted out of the city. We get the scene of Arabin and Farron on a rooftop watching it happen. He worked with Farron the whole time so that Farron would take the crown of being the new crime lord, and thus begins Celaena's long stint in the salt mines. Womp womp.
John.
Let's get into Assassin in the Empire favorite moments from this story.
Yeah, so I wrote, because it's like after, and it like does like a whole little moment where she's already captured. It's like having a moment of after, you know, the events of whatever will happen in this part of the book. And I just went, oh, geez, not an after before the before.
And in response, I wrote, and it's an after before the before of the before that we already know the after to. I think it's pretty crazy.
There's a lot going on.
It's wild.
Oh my gosh. I have like a question from chapter 1 where Sam suggests running away, and Selena thinks it was an absurd idea, really, leaving Rifthold. Where would they even go? And I was just thinking about how like everyone, I feel like so many of these characters seem to have this like fierce pride and loyalty to their homeland, but like, why do you think Selena never entertains the idea of returning to Terrasen?
Because people might recognize her or know her. Maybe bad memories.
I feel like there's nothing really for her to go back to, though, right?
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's still taken over by Otterland, so it's not like it's...
Yeah,
So
I
it's
guess
like,
that's
what
true.
would she do if she would go back?
I guess because doesn't Nehemia ask her about this at some point in Throne of Glass or Crown of Midnight? Like, once you're free, would you return to Terrasen?
Oh, yeah, I vaguely remember that.
Because even Ansel, who has a very similar story, is so, like, her big
Right.
part of her story is to go back and take over her, get her family home back and, you know, whatever. But, yeah, Selena doesn't really have that. But I would say she doesn't really have any sort of drive to do anything for Throne of Glass or Crown of Midnight as far as helping Nehemia or, like, the whole rebellion or any of that stuff. So she doesn't, I think at this point at least, have any of that drive
Yeah.
for sure. But
And maybe it's more of a question of they. Like, maybe she thinks that he would, like, both of them would not have anywhere to go there. And she's concerned about them as a couple more than just herself.
Yeah. But at this point, he also still doesn't know who she actually is. So
Right.
maybe that is part of it, that like they would recognize her or whatever.
Maybe it's even, I've thought about this, maybe it's even the opposite. Like, she still knows that maybe eventually she would almost have to go back or something. Like, she can't leave because she still knows she's like the last heir. So it's like, how could she just get up and leave the continent?
Yeah. I was bringing up the map. If I'm correct, her parents were killed in Terrasen, right? Like,
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
she was still there.
In Orinth, yeah.
And Arabin claims to have found her on a riverbank, but on the map there is no river that leads from Terrasen all the way to Rifthold. So he would have had to either somehow lied about that or found her on a riverbank in Terrasen. And why would he be there unless he was maybe the assassin who killed her parents and then took her in? Because what if, like, he was hired to kill off, like, by the king? He lives in Rifthold. The king would just be like, I'll just get the king of the assassins to go kill off this royal family and come back.
I'm speechless.
So this could be like a deep dive, but I feel like that's a huge plot hole because I'm looking at the map and yeah, there's this, like, where Orinth is. There's like the end of the Florine River that comes in from the North Sea, but the only other river that hits Rifthold is the Avery.
Yeah.
That goes like toward the Farian Gap.
If we're looking at parallels to Ansel's story, which I get is its own other story, but when Ansel's family died, she took her dad's sword and she ran. She ran and ran and ran until she passed out, and the Mute Master is who found her and brought her back to the keep. So maybe similar parallel, maybe her family died and she ran and ran and ran and ran until she passed out, and then the
Maybe.
King of the Assassins brought her back to the keep.
Maybe, but that's
All of this is speculation, but maybe.
yeah, that'd still be a long way to run though to get to the Avery from where she was in Terrasen.
How far is Briarcliff to the Red Desert?
We got to compare their running speeds,
Great
like how
question.
fit were they? And yeah, maybe she was running for days. It didn't have to be a sprint, but I don't know. It was just something I thought was weird, and then I liked the theory of him being sent there and like, oh, I found you on the riverbanks, and I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember. I honestly can't remember if there's like more to that story.
Maybe we'll find out one day.
Maybe we will.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
Good job, Kyle.
Thanks.
Wow.
thanks, Kyle. Good call.
While we were on the subject of her going back, I just thought I'd throw it in there.
All right.
All right.
Well, now that our minds are
Chapter
blown,
2.
chapter 2.
I just highlighted the sentence where it says, if the vaults were the heart of Rifthold's underworld, then the glass castle was the soul of Otterland's empire.
Oh,
Because
they
I
said
could
it.
not Yeah, I could not remember why this was called The Assassin in the Underworld. I was like, what is the Underworld?
Yeah, well, and they
The
don't even
sewers.
say it until this one, like until the
but-
Empire. So
Yeah, I guess it's about the vaults then, and the vaults underneath versus like the glass castle. Anyway.
So this is like the time that Sam gets the mysterious job to kill Io and Jane and the second in command, Rourke Farron. And this, to me, like reading it after having read Throne of Glass and technically, I guess, Crown of Midnight as well, it was like that moment when you're like watching a horror movie and they're going to open the door or something. And you're like, no, don't open the door. He's right behind the door, you know? And you're like yelling at them through the TV screen. I totally had the moment in this conversation. He's telling her it's going to be great. Nothing will be the problem. And then, you know, as the book continues, I'm going to do it by myself. No, you stay home and pack, like the whole thing. And the whole time I'm just wanting to like yell at them and stop them from all the things that they do. And obviously it's a book and they can't hear me. But that was totally me at this moment. But
Yeah, I agree. Oh, but this cute little moment where Selena like apologizes to Sam and she says, I'm sorry for what I said earlier today. And he says, an apology from Selena Sardathian? His eyes danced with light. Do I dream?
I loved it. Yep.
I thought that was so cute. But then at this point, it just made me so sad at the same time to think about how Sam dies never knowing her real name.
yeah.
And he loves her and he's loved her for like so long and he literally doesn't even know who she is. And it just made me sad.
Well, and I thought that with her relationship with Kale later, like, because they do go all the way. And she says, you know, because I waited last time and then it was too late. And then she thinks maybe she won't see him again because she's going on the boat. And so she tells him in an indirect way what her real name is, you know? So it's like she maybe tries to make up for that with her relationship with Kale, which I loved Kale. So I was all about that. With this same conversation, though, with Sam, he said they're making out on the bed or whatever. And he's like, it can wait. It can wait. He said, thickly kissing her collarbone. We have all the time in the world. Stop it.
I wrote, ow, Sarah.
Like, what the heck? And this is one of those too, like, I'm having these feelings of like heartbroken already for them. I think if we had read Assassin's Blade first, I would have been like, oh, this is so sweet. I'm all about it. And same with like the, you know, what I said earlier with them getting this job to kill Io and Jane and Rourke Farron. And I would have just been like, okay, cool. Do the one more job. No problems here, you know, but it just is that whole different perspective reading it here. But that one hit hard. Mm-hmm. Oof.
Yeah, and chapter 3, this is when Arobin gets into her apartment for the first time, and just his greeting when he says, hello, darling, just disgusting. You disgusting little weasel of a man. Just, ugh. Oh.
So the other day I said something to my oldest daughter, Emma, and I said, okay, darling, or something like that. And she goes, you're not a bad guy. And I was like, what do you mean? She goes, only bad guys say darling.
Nice.
What?
She knows what's up.
So then when I read this, I was like, oh, he's a bad guy.
Yeah, she knows what's up.
But apparently, according to Emma, bad guys say darling, and it's here, so.
She has great intuition.
So
They
neat.
do, especially the darling. If they drop the R and put
Yeah,
the
that's right. Yeah, it's even worse.
I think because Captain Hook says that, and that would be my guess where my 5-year-old gets someone saying darling like that.
And then there's another character in Akatar whose first line is very similar.
But he is not a bad guy.
Oh,
Right, John?
that's right.
He's supposed to be. Right, John?
Bad daddy.
Okay, so, this was also about Arobin. Oh my gosh. I just got so mad all over again reading this. When it's like the same conversation where he had shown up in her apartment and this is his last ditch effort to get her to stay. And he says, no matter what I have done, I really do love you, Selena. The word hit her like a stone to the head. He'd never said that word to her before. Ever. And I just wrote all caps, ew, you sick, filthy scum.
For real.
This just like made my skin crawl. Like we're seeing how disgustingly manipulative he is. We've gotten glimpses of it before, but this is like a moment of desperation for him. And he's just like, just seeing the kind of things that he's willing to do to manipulate her to get her to stay, or this entitlement he feels toward her to like keep her close and keep her like loyal to him is just, so gross.
Well, and then like immediately after, she said, Selena is like thinking to herself, he was using words as chains to bind her again. He'd had so many chances over the years to tell her that he loved her. He'd known how much she craved those words, but he hadn't spoken them until he needed to use them as a weapon. And that like is part of that like whole skin crawly, creepy feeling you get when he does say it. Like it's so well described there, exactly the feeling. But I was just so proud of Selena finally figuring it out. How long has he been? I mean, obviously she's been with him since she was 8, but like how long had it really turned into the manipulation to get her to do all of whatever the things that she's had to do? But yeah, that
it's a good thing that Sam said it first, because she got a non-manipulative I love you, and now that she's getting one, she could probably more easily tell the difference about someone who actually meant it.
Yeah, that is very true.
Yeah, that's so true.
In this next part, I know it's okay. So the quote is, before I start fangirling, so we're all on the same page. Sam said, "My name is Sam Cortland, and I will not be afraid." And I was like, oh. That's what Selena has said so many times, obviously saying her own name instead. But I just think it is so, so, so precious that she got it from Sam and that it has stuck with her so long. It has helped her through so much. So even though Sam hasn't been there, he really has been there for her in a way and helped her through the mines, helped her through the competition to become the King's champion, to a bunch of things that's probably happened to her in her life. And that was where I started like, I'm going to totally cry in this book. It's going to happen. Like that was where it started for me. Ugh.
I just wrote that it probably made being called a coward by Nehemia sting so much more.
Yeah.
Yes. And and even in that same conversation right before that, she asks him what his darkest secret is. And he says, well, what's yours? And she says, deep down, I'm a coward. I'm a coward and I'm scared. I'm scared all the time, always. And that's why he tells her that. It's such like a vulnerability point for her. And Nehemia literally speaks like exactly to it, to a T. And it's,
well, and like to think so now sad. That we know her secret, and knowing that she probably is afraid all the time that someone's going to figure it out or recognize her, or her eyes, the connection that is like so predominant in her lineage or whatever, that she hides them from the king, like all of the things that she probably is like scared literally all the time, not in the way that Sam thinks, but she probably, I don't know if that's just, it's deep. And I just love that she says that from Sam. It means so much more to me now. So precious. Ugh. Going into chapter 5, this is another thing. I think it was just casually said. I don't think it had any deep meaning to it, but I took it as such, coming from the conversation with Arabin, where he finally says like he loves her, but is using it as a weapon. And then later it said, Arabin had been so clever about it too. He'd brought in the most despicable people, rapists, murderers, rogue assassins who have butchered innocents. And he made her read all of the information he'd gathered on them, made her read all of the awful things that they had done, until she was so enraged she couldn't think straight, until she was aching to make them suffer. He'd honed her anger into a lethal blade, and she'd let him. And so I think we see some of this like lethal anger happen a lot, where she does lose control almost in that way when she gets such certain information, because that's how she was trained to assassinate people, basically. But I really don't trust that Arabin was bringing in the rapists and the murderers and the rogue assassins that are just casually laying about for some preteen to murder. Like, it's like, there's no way. It had to be literally just any old other person that he came up with, and then whatever made up lies he came up with that to get them to do it. But I would believe he was doing that for Sam as well, because Sam also didn't want to be killing because he liked it, and that whole conversation, which is just a whole nother level of his manipulation and his power over them, that he could literally get them to murder people. Like, it's a lot, but he's the worst.
I forgot to, I guess, write, but I sort of do wish that this book went back even further to show what like her first time having to do it would be, because we kind of get into a point where she's already comfortable with it, and I kind of wonder what the first mountain of manipulation he had to do to be like, this is an okay lifestyle for you now that your parents are dead and I found you, let's kill some people. Like, what was that whole process like?
I had it just written that, like you said, it does make sense as to why whenever she is angry or like she feels like there's been some sort of injustice, her first response is to like just go on a raged killing spree, and she goes into that killing calm or whatever. Like that's literally how he trained her to respond to stuff like that. But I also feel like in doing that, Arabin accidentally sort of set her up to have this really strong moral code of not wanting to kill anyone who didn't quote unquote deserve it. And I think that's why she starts to help more people, or she has such a strong conviction about freeing these slaves, because she knows they're innocent, like they didn't do anything, and the people who are enslaving them are the ones who deserve to be killed or whatever. But I feel like that was almost like an unintentional sort of backfiring on Arabin's part, because I don't think he intended for her to. Yeah,
he's had a couple of those
yep.
in this book. Being a parent is hard. You're never going to get it all right.
Oh, and then I thought this was super interesting too when she's in the vaults, and we kind of talked about this in the last episode, but she, in her internal monologue, it says she wondered if it was better to wind up as a slave here or a prisoner in a brutal labor camp like Endovir. Both seemed like similar versions of a living hell, which I thought, like it was interesting that she was comparing those two things. And then initially I wrote, she's not going to have to wonder much longer.
Oh, rip.
She's got to do the other one and compare them.
But yeah, I did think that was interesting that she was seeing like other slaves and being like, oh, like this is awful. Like I wonder what, I don't know, wonder what other people are going through. I guess she's having sympathy for other people she's seeing. And then, I was just like screaming at Selena again at the end of chapter 5, where it says, "I love you," Sam said. Selena wrapped her arms around him and held him close, breathing in his scent. Her only reply was, "I hate packing." And I was just like, say it back, you fool. Like, not only does he die not knowing her real name, he also dies never hearing her tell him that she loves him. Because they have a few moments like this where he says it to her and she just like never says it back. And she even thinks about it and she just never says it. And it's like, it just like
she loves packing. All her emotions deep down in a hole.
Kyle, I love Saturdays. That movie that we keep saying we want you to watch has a guy who always says, "I love you." And she's like, "I love Saturdays." I love the weekend. And it's Robin from How I Met Your Mother who says it. It's really funny.
That's even better.
I know. Okay, chapter 6, I just have a couple things just like that where she was like, "I love packing." But in this one, she was sitting around waiting for Sam to come back. This is when it first started. I think it was like 9 o'clock. She agreed to go find him at midnight or something. But it said, even an utterly sinful romance novel hadn't held her interest. And I was like, okay, Selena, drop the recommendation though. I want to read it anyway. And then she finally like, okay, fine, I'll just pack or something. And it said she'd have to leave her furniture and most of her shoes behind for now, but there was no way in hell she was going to move to the southern continent without all of her books. And I was like, yes, relatable. If Instagram was a thing, Selena would have her own bookstagram doing her things. Just killed this guy while reading this book. Like, it'd be a whole thing.
Get ready with me to complete an assassination.
Oh, so funny. I mentioned it earlier when you were talking about the music that Sam got her after going to the theater, with just the description of the music and then the silence. And this is the moment that it happens. The King of Assassins slowly got to his feet. She saw the expression in his eyes and knew what he was going to say long before he opened his mouth and whispered, "I am sorry." The silence struck. And that was just, that moment. And she took the clock off the wall that she had, or off the mantle that she had been staring at, waiting for it to get home, and she like throws it across, and that whole moment. But it wasn't until chapter 8 when she actually went and saw Sam's body. That is when I officially cried for the first time reading these books. And it wasn't even necessarily like the fact that he was dead. It was the description of his bodies and all the things that he had to go through. Specifically the fact that his eyes were missing. Like that, it was a lot, and it's heavy, and it just makes me really, really sad. It jumps into chapter 9 where she does decide to go get revenge on him. I do think Arabin having that conversation right outside her door was part of that manipulation. Yep. There's no way in heck he would just have a business meeting in the hallway. Like, he has been in his office 100 times. Did he have that meeting with the lawyers?
Yes. I know Harding was one of them. I think Turn was the other one.
I was going to say, so he had to meet with the lawyers. But in Crown of Midnight, when Kale gets taken to the warehouse, she mentions a lot of times Sam or when this happened the first time and the things that didn't really connect. So now we're seeing that with the huge similarities, even from like jumping from one building into the next, into the window and all of those things. So that was just really interesting. But it's in chapter 10 where it just says they had been waiting for her. And you know it's a trap. Like Wesley tried to warn her. We obviously know this because we have read Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. I do think it was weird, though, for Farron to be there because I think Jane was like surprised because he had no idea this was going to happen and he died because that was the whole reason for it all was for that him to be assassinated. Yes. But I do think it was weird for Farron to be there because Selena just like throws this dagger. It just happens to hit one of them, but like she could have easily just turned a little bit and got him. I'm like, if you know that like this epic assassin is coming, why would you also be in the room? I just felt like that was a little poor planning on his part, but other than I guess that he's sadistic and weirdly smiled through the whole thing,
I guess.
Yeah, and just smiled as all his people were dying, like NBD. Yeah, so that was a whole thing. I do think it was weird when she finally gets pulled out. It said, motioning to 3 tall, well-dressed men as he passed, not petty guards. She'd seen those 3 men before somewhere. At some point, she couldn't quite recall.
I noted this too and was trying to think of who it might be. This one when she was like passing out from the gas.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Oh.
And there's like 3 guys that are like coming into the room or something like that.
The only 3 guys would be the lawyer guys that I would think of. But the fact that they're like well dressed, they're not petty guards. I don't know who these people would be or why it's worth pointing out. And it doesn't get explained for the rest of this book.
I'm doing a search to see if I can find it.
You're like searching the book or you're Googling?
Yeah, no, I'm like searching the book. I guess I could Google it or you could Google it.
I'm afraid to Google things, so I will let you.
Yeah, no, you don't Google anything.
Okay.
Wasn't there like a passage that she was walking in to talk to Arabin and she almost bumped into 3 tall guys who were walking out? Wesley, his bodyguard, was looking at her and she almost bumped into the men, but she was so angry she just stormed right past them. I was trying to find where that was, but I couldn't remember.
What story would that have been in?
Yeah, that's what I couldn't remember which story it was part of.
I don't know why that specifically feels like it's important, why it would be described here, but what did you find, Kyle?
I found it's right after she pays Sam's debt and finds out that he used her money to, buy Lysandra's bidding. The paragraph just says, "Don't come looking for me for a good long while," she said, "because I might kill you before I see you before then, Arabin." And he waved a hand at her, saying, "I look forward to the fight." She left. As she strode through his study doors, she almost slammed into the 3 tall men who were walking in. They all took one look at her face and then muttered apologies. She ignored them and ignored Wesley's dark stare as she strode past them. Arabin's business was his own, and she had her own life now. That's all it says.
That had to be it. It had to be them coming for like a meeting about it or something.
Yep.
Yeah, and being on the inside or whatever. And that's also probably how Wesley knew that it was a trap and whatever. Interesting. Well, thanks for deep diving that for me, guys. Anyways, that takes us to chapter 12, which is the last chapter. It said, Arabin had always seen to it that the world knew of her handiwork. He always got word out through secret channels when another victim had fallen to Selena Sardothian. And now the very thing that had earned her the right to call herself Otterland's assassin would be what would seal her doom. And I just feel like from the very beginning, this is calculated by Arabin, that it seems like, it pumps up her pride. It is a moment, she wants to keep this title. It keeps her going to do assassinations and things. But at the same time, it kind of keeps his hands clean. If things were to fall down, he could be like, that was Otterland's assassin. That was the person who got all the notoriety for it. He was just kind of in the shadows. So while she thinks it's some cool title or whatever, I really do think that it was just another manipulation by Arabin being the literal worst.
Literally.
Yeah.
Agreed. I was just cracking up at the scene with the king where Selena just is thinking to herself as she's, noting things around the room. She's talking about the king and it says, he wore a sword at his side, the sword whose name everyone knew.
What I thought was funny is that she didn't say what the sword's name was.
Because it's nothing.
Yeah, and I thought like apparently not. If like one of the last times we heard of it, she had to name the sword, but then remind us that was the name of his sword.
Yeah. When it's like, if I was reading Assassin's Blade first and I just read that sentence, it'd be the sword whose name everyone knew, I'd be like, well, I don't know what it is. It just feels so random to put that.
Thinking back to what we found out a few episodes ago, I think, where these were 5 separate stories that were put up only as ebooks before anything else was out. So, like, literally no one knew. Like, no one, they had to read this and be like, yeah, sure, I guess. I don't know. Like, you didn't say the name.
Well, and then what if she wrote this and she was like, well, this is I just haven't named it yet. I'll put it in later or something.
We'll get that in post.
Yeah, I just love that, like, that she finally says the name of the sword in the first book, but it's like, I don't know.
Nothing.
Now I'm just imagining her being like, I gotta name this sword, but I'm just coming up with nothing. That's it.
Nothing. That's the one.
She accidentally published this as it was. Like, I forgot to put the name in there. So in the next book, it had its own paragraph. No, there you go. That's what it is.
I just love also this interaction she has with the king. First of all, she looks the king straight in the eyes, which she usually directly hides. Like this happens first. But for Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, she usually hides her eyes, which we find out later is because like the ring of, I think it's gold in her eyes that is
her Ash River eyes.
Yes, is fairly predominant in her family, and she's afraid it will give away her identity. But here she just looks him straight in the eyes and she says, like, make it quick, or whatever she says, or make it fast as far as her death goes. And so the King of Otterland, of course, being the jerk that he is, instead says, you will be sent with orders to keep you alive as long as possible. So you will have the chance to enjoy Indivir's special kind of agony. So I knew that they'd like tried to keep her alive. They mention it a lot when Dorian comes to get her the first time. Obviously, they do like lay hands on her, like they whip her and like all the things that happen to her back and stuff, but they did keep her alive as long as possible. But it's interesting, this interaction. I wonder if that also plays into their relationship when she gets back. Like he remembers these things from her. It's like a constant battle of wills. I think that plays a lot more in my head, knowing that in their relationship. I also wonder how this interaction would have been different if Dorian or Kale were there, or how that would have affected the books later if they were there, seeing her at this setting at 16 or 17, I guess, and being this broken and everything, how that would have played into things later. But obviously they're on vacation, so they didn't know. And then it said, another moment of quiet. He asked, why did you do it? Arabin's attention drifted back to the wagon, already small dot in the rolling foothills of Rifthold, because I don't like sharing my belongings. And that's when we find out that Arabin really had been behind the whole thing and planned it with Farron to really kill Jane. They kind of talk about how Arabin was going to save her out of the prison and all the things, but he clearly had a chance to do it and still let her go to the salt mines. And in Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, we just know the speculation of potentially did he do it. We don't really know because Selena doesn't really have confirmation.
She still thinks it wasn't him.
I was going to say, I think she has speculation that at least that somebody like turned on her. I don't know that she 100% thinks it's Arabin, but now obviously we know, and that's a whole thing. But I don't know. I just think like you did all of this because of her relationship with Sam. The dude has like serious issues and could have gone about it such a different way, even if it was just to get rid of Sam. I don't know why he had to do anything for Selena. I don't know. The whole thing is just crazy.
Well, so there's some stuff that we learn in Crown of Midnight about like why they think some of this stuff happened. And it was about Arabin getting in good with the new crime lord, because the whole point was that Rourke was going to be the new crime lord. And if Arabin was the one who helped him get there, then that would put him in a really good position with the crime lord of Rifthold or whatever. So I think so much of it was like self-serving. But then Selena and Sam even have a conversation about how Sam always thought that she would pick Arabin every time. And she obviously throughout the course of this prequel decides to choose Sam over Arabin. And so I feel like part of it is just his jealousy. And he clearly feels so entitled to her that he would be willing to sacrifice somebody that he had trained in this whole like crossfire of the thing and like hope that, I don't know, it's just the setup of it is still, it's so awful. But like, it's all,
Yeah, it's literally just like, if I don't get to have you, then no one does kind of vibe.
Literally. Yeah. So this is when I feel like I want to bring up my other question that I had when I was reading about Sam's mom, because Sam's mother was a courtesan and she was a favorite of Arabin's, and it says that she was murdered by a jealous client. And I feel like at this point in the story, like learning the lengths that he will go to not have to share his belongings, quote unquote, I feel like Arabin either killed her himself or had her killed.
Okay, so then with Kyle's thing, he killed Sam's mom and took Sam.
Yep.
He killed Selena's parents and took Selena. What if that's just like his creepy thing?
It's his MO. He's going to start killing other families, taking their kids, and raising up his own little orphan army of manipulated people.
Ugh, and he says something about Lysandra too. Like, why shouldn't I enjoy my investments?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because he's been funding her.
Yeah.
Another thing that, because later again, Selena brings up the whole idea of him, how he could have been her lover if he decided to take it that way. And, you know, and then he says that about Lysandra. It's just, the dude is, he needs to have
So
somebody needs to get revenge on this dude.
Well, so like, I don't know if he did kill Sam's mom and he's also Sam's father. Like, I don't necessarily know that both of those things are true, or if either of them are true. Like, we don't get confirmation of that. But just reading that sentence, just that little blip of like, murdered by a jealous client, that's literally all it says. But that was enough for me to be like, excuse me.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Do you think, because like sometimes in other book series I've seen, there's like a villain that you just hate. There's like no redeemable qualities during that story. But sometimes you get a little prequel about how that villain grew up, and then you're like, oh, well, I loved them in that story, but they turned out bad. Do you think if you had a origin of Arabin that you would ever find him as like I see why he's so messed up? Or is this just like totally irredeemable no matter how he got there?
No, he's the worst. Same with the King of Otterland. I think they're like on the same tier for me.
I think I dislike Arabin more than I dislike the King of Otterland.
Same.
Ugh, so gross.
Okay. Anyways, then we get to after again, and this is on her way to the salt mines, and she's in the back of this like prison wagon, and she looks outside, and it said, and there standing in the copse of thorns was a white stag. Is this the like vision dream she has later? Is this what she remembers? Because I know she has like a dream of this on the day her parents died, and she has like a dream of a white stag on the other side of a river or something, or a creek, however you want to say it. And thank you, Kyle. Stream on the other side of the stream, and I just don't know what it is. Like, I get that the white stag is about Terracin and it's in the stars and whatever, and I'm sure one day maybe it means something huge, and I just don't know what it is yet, but I am curious. So okay, cool. No answers mean it probably does mean something, so we're just going to move on.
I don't actually know.
It's the sign of the North Lord, right?
Yeah,
it's the Lord of the North. Yeah,
Lord of the North.
We know the star, the stag of the north, is also like a constellation.
Yeah, that leads home to Terracin.
Yeah,
right.
There are also some hints, and I think it even mentions it in this paragraph. There are also hints that it's not the only one, like that they have been like hunted.
Oh yeah.
Because the guys were mad. They couldn't, like, they missed it when they shot at it or whatever.
Which I thought was interesting. I don't think I really realized that on the first read through. I always thought that it was like that was the only one.
Right.
And now it's kind of weird to me that it's not, though, at the same time.
It could be the only one left.
Yeah, well, I do think that is true.
Yeah.
Maybe it was
at least that's what they
sign.
make it sound like anyway. Like there's not many left, but
just the fact that it's like the other one was a dream that she was having or a memory or something. This is like an actual. It's actually there. But whenever it was first being read and it was like after, and then it's a story, and then all of a sudden there's a stag, and I was like, oh, she's dreaming again, whatever. And then it was like the guys got mad because they missed it, and I was like, oh no, this is like real life. So I don't know, maybe it's important because I assume because it's about Terracin and that's where she's from. So I don't know. Anyways, and then it goes into the beginning, and I just loved that she went into Endovir with her chin held high, and she just says, my name is Selena Sardothian. I will not be afraid. And I was like, yes, girl, go off, do your
Go
thing.
off, queen.
Live in your prison, but like, I know that's awful, but like, I don't know, because there are those, like, you're reading it, well, how does this make sense here, and how does that make sense there? Because when she comes out of the prison, it is like, no, she was strong in there, and she was helping others, and she was fighting, and whatever, but, like, on her way to the prison, she was not there. And then I just love that it's with Sam's line that, like, gets her through to that moment, so that was really cool.
Yeah.
But
So good. So good. Okay. Well, that's the end of the Assassin's Blade. I did want to follow up really quick with some of the information that we get that kind of like rounds out this story. This was some information we pieced together in Crown of Midnight that we learned from Chaol. So Selena asks Chaol if he knows who Rourke Farren is, and he says the crime lord, and she wants to know if like he's ever dealt with him, and he said no, but that's because Farren's dead. So like that's the first time that Selena learns that Rourke Farren did die, and it happened right after the events of this book. I think it's like the next day or like 3 days later or something like that. Like it's like right after the events of the Assassin's Blade. Chaol says so like Rourke Farren and his 3 top men, I wonder if that's the 3 people.
That's what I was thinking too.
I wonder if
I
it
didn't
is
think
those
about
3
that.
people.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet it is. Okay, so
Which makes Wesley a total badass.
Yes, just about
really
Yeah.
does.
Yes. 100%.
Yes. So Rourke Farren and his 3 top men were all found murdered by Wesley, Arobin Hommel's personal guard. Arobin then, the next day, killed Wesley by impaling him, still alive, on the iron fence outside of Rourke's house until he bled out. And apparently Arobin had instructed the servants of the house to leave him there and just like let him die on the fence, like outside the house. And Chaol says, we thought it was an attempt to balance the blood feud so that when the next crime lord ascended, they wouldn't view Arobin and his assassins as enemies because Wesley was the one who killed Rourke Farren.
I didn't really care about that before, but that just made me really sad. Because I was
I
like,
know.
oh, okay, well, that's weird what's happening over there with those guys. Don't know who they are.
Yeah,
That
and I
makes me
feel like
sad.
you kind of missed that. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I felt like I had to recap it because I even forgot what happened. But then Chaol asks if someone had betrayed her because that's the first time Chaol finds out that like that was, all the stuff that went down with Rourke Farren was like how she was captured and sent to Endovir. And she says she still doesn't know who betrayed her, which even in those first moments, immediately she's like, it couldn't have been Arobin. Like there's no way it was Arobin. And that's just like part of his whole manipulation, the way that he's played that her whole life, but then specifically in this scenario. But she just says, someone hired me and my companion to kill Farren, but it was all just a trap and Farren was the bait, which like obviously now after reading this story, we know that it was Arobin who did that, but like she still doesn't know. So anyway, it's just
Dang.
crazy. So now that we have all the information, what would you guys rate this book, The Assassin's Blade, out of 5?
Yeah, so I rated it 3 stars, which is probably the lowest I've ever rated any SJM book. I think it's just like, because it does have like a connecting story over all 5 of them, but I did struggle at the beginning of each story because it does, okay, I have to pick up again. Oh, yep, here's the review part again. And I just wish she wrote it. I get that it was released individually at one time, but I think if it was just written as a book, as a solid one time through, I would have enjoyed it overall. Is just some of the choppiness of it that I struggled with. I did love getting to know more about the characters and some of the things. I don't really understand why people get so mad about it being here or there or after the other one.
Me
But maybe I will understand that and then have better feelings or more feelings about the book and the information. But for now, just reading a book with that, I gave it 3 stars.
I also gave it 3 stars, which freaked Lauren out when she
Dude, I was like, was I too harsh or did you get nicer?
But for sort of the same reasons, like having to, pick up with a review at the beginning of each one, the pacing, like she said, was off to me. And it really was like the world building and the character like development that I liked the best out of it, but it definitely was not my favorite. I feel like with how much I struggled with Throne of Glass when we read it, kind of slow to pick up, I felt like there was a little bit of that in each of these stories. And like she said, I just wanted to do it once and then have the story
Read
move.
the book.
But
Yeah, I also rated this 3 stars on my first read, but as a second read, I rated it 4 stars. I got on my I don't know. I got on my good. Honestly, I think the placement changes it for me because we read it fourth the first time. So we had read Air of Fire first and then read The Assassin's Blade and then went on to Queen of Shadows. And I didn't really like that on our first read. It sounds like John did, but I got on GoodReads and I was like, I only rated this 3 stars. I'm changing it. Updated my rating. So it definitely, John and I talked about this a little bit more today too, but it felt a lot more emotional to read the second time around. And I don't know if it's just because you have a bigger picture understanding of all these characters and the things that happen in the full light of the series, or if it's just that we read it in a different place, or I don't know, that I'm paying more attention because we're talking about it here. I don't know what it is, but I definitely enjoyed it a lot more the second time. I also think knowing the pace of the book and what it's like before reading it, I think helped with my expectations as well. Because the first time I was just annoyed that I had to stop at the point I was in the story and go back and read it. And I just did not want to. I think that definitely made a difference. But John, what about you?
Yeah, I gave it a 4.5 the first time, and I would say I would drop it down to a 4 this time. I'm trying to think of why I gave it a 4.5.
I know, I was surprised by that.
Yeah, a 4, like you said, it was a bit more emotional this time around, I feel like, with some of the events that took place. I don't remember being so affected, especially by when you find out how Sam looks and when you learn what happened to him.
Yeah.
That was definitely way more emotional this time around.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I felt like that too.
So how did you guys feel about reading Assassin's Blade third compared to first, or I think the other argument is fourth?
Yeah.
For me, I felt like it made sense going into it. Having only read Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, we talked about it with Crown of Midnight. It feels almost like we're closing the chapter on this moment in Rifthold and we are literally crossing the sea into somewhere else. So it made sense. It felt like to pause for a second, go back, reread, and figure out, actually read because we haven't read this one yet, and take that moment, not knowing really what happens later. I don't really know if I like it here, obviously, compared to after Air of Fire, or how that affects even if I wish I read it first. Right now, I don't really feel like I had to have read it first. I'm okay that I read it third. I think I will hold my feelings until after Air of Fire, though, to make my official, this is when you should read it kind of a thing. So, yes.
I think in terms of just reading the whole series all the way through, I would have preferred it first. And I think I struggled to get through it a little bit because of that, because of kind of knowing where the other one starts. I knew where some of these characters ended up. I felt like I had taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back, kind of, with how much I already struggled with the first book's pacing. I felt like it was just a hard shift, sort of like when TV shows have filler episodes, and I just want the main plot to keep going. But I will also add, I just thought of it, that if I read this book first, not knowing that the future books were not set up like this, like the ones that are actual chapter books, I probably would not continue reading the series because I just wasn't a fan of the anthology style, like I said. And if I thought the other books were like that, I wouldn't have continued.
Yeah, I have heard a lot of people say that as an argument for not reading it first because it is so different, and it's the way that it's set up, you don't already care about the characters, and so if you're kind of going in blind and just starting with that book, you might not continue reading the series. So I have heard that as well. I obviously have waffled back and forth on this a lot leading up to this reread, because when John and I first read the series, we read it fourth, and I did not like that. I felt like it just wasn't a good stopping point for me. I did not want to have to stop and go back and read the prequel at that point, and it just made it really hard to get into. So I was recommending initially that people should read it first, because my argument was that you get such a higher emotional impact not knowing that Sam's going to die, and not knowing she's going to be sent to Endovir. It's definitely a very different perspective when you know how the story's going to end when you start it. But after doing this reread, unless you're like Kyle and you need all the events in chronological order, in which case definitely read it first. I'm 100% team read it third. I think, like you said, Lauren, this is a much more natural stopping point in the story. And you are closing that chapter on Selena finding out she's Aelin and going back and getting some of her backstory at that point. And then I also really love the way that some of the things in Assassin's Blade tie in, and they feel so much more meaningful when you read them in Assassin's Blade, knowing how they have affected her in the years like since then, just the phrases from Sam or like the argument with Nehemia, like there's just like some things that hit a lot harder. I feel like reading it in this order that I just really liked. So.
Well, and I care so much more about Selena. So, like, hearing Arabin being so manipulative to her, and I'm like, no, she's not like this. Like, she, you know, that kind of thing. I think that hit a lot more compared to if it was just like, okay, some 16-year-old girl, like, whatever.
I do think too, you know what's going to happen, and it almost makes it worse because you don't know like when it's coming. There's a few times that he has these near death things, or she's waiting for him to come home, and you're like, is this it? Like it's like it almost keeps you on the edge of your seat, even though you know how it's going to end, because you just like don't know how it's going to happen.
Yeah, like with the spider silk on his heart. You know what I mean? Like, oh, she saved his life, but like she doesn't.
Yeah. I don't know. John, what are your thoughts on this?
After thinking about it, I think I would still prefer it at number 4.
Really?
So after Heir of Fire.
Okay.
I think we just leave it at, we'll talk about it after Heir of Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that's okay. So one thing Connor and I have been joking about is adding a cry counter at the end of every episode. And so far, no one's cried, I don't think. I think there's been some tearing up, some moments kind of a thing.
Yes.
But this is the first official time someone has had tears fall out of their eyes. We're going to keep a counter for all 4 of us. And if I had to put money on it, mine is going to be the highest of anyone's because I cry on the regular and I don't think any of the other ones do. But I have cried one time when I read about Sam and we read about his body and all of those things. So
yeah,
cry counter 1 for Lauren, and we will keep track of that if it happens again. So, yes.
All right. Well, that is a wrap on episode 8. In our next episode, we will be discussing Heir of Fire, chapters 1 through 19.
Yes. So in the meantime, please don't forget to rate, review, subscribe wherever you are enjoying this podcast. Make sure you're following us on Instagram and TikTok, and check out our website for our links. We also recently added some new stickers and bookmarks. Check out our Patreon for extra community, extra perks, all the things. We have the Snack Court for $5 a month and Featuring Book Club for $10 a month. And lastly, sign up for our newsletter at our website, betweenpagesandfriends.com. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.